Well, as most of you know, the draft of ISO 9001-2015 has been available for review, and our next guest had a chance to take a look at it with an eye toward risk management. Although the new version of ISO 9001 does address risk, it doesn't really go far enough. Joining us now is Jim Lamprecht, author of the article, The Many Uncertainties of Risk as Currently Stated in ISO 9001-2015, which first ran on the CIRM Risk Insights blog. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Mike, and good morning, Dirk. Thank you for having me on the show.
Hey, no problem. Hey, Jim, before we get started, tell us a little bit about your background with ISO 9001, just so people know where you're coming from.
Right. Well, I started with ISO back in 1989, so that's a long time ago. And I had the first book published on ISO that you can see over my shoulder, the ISO 9001, the yellow book. That was Marcel Decker in 1992. And I was a member of the TC 176 committee so I don't remember if it was 90 or 91 till about 2000. So for about 10 years, I was a voting member of the TC 176 committee. And I've since sort of retired from that capacity for the last, ever since 2001 to 2002, excuse me.
Okay. So in your article, you do say that the latest draft of ISO 9001-2015 does at least address risk. Now, is that something new, or has it addressed risk in the past?
Well, 9001, no, that's the standard itself, 9001, that's the first time it's addressing risk. There's been other ISO documents addressing risk, but not the 9001 series. That's the first time they will attempt to address it in a couple of years.
And from your article, I got the impression that, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but along the lines of, well, it's great that they're addressing it, but they didn't really go far enough. Do I have that right?
Yes. I had two reactions to what I read, and which were expressed in the article. Some of the requirements are relatively clear, and you can say, okay, I know how to address that, and I've given some examples in the article. And some of the requirements are a little broad, I would say, as a euphemism, actually, and you don't quite know how to react. So I would have liked to see a little more specific requirement, although I know that the committee is in a very delicate position. You don't want, when you issue a standard, you don't want to be too specific because people are going to react to it. But then again, if the sentence that you read is so broad and so vague, then you're open to the flip side of the coin, where anybody can interpret the requirement any way they want, and then I don't think you have achieved anything. So I think it's a very good first step. It seems to me, from what I read, there are good ideas. It's very good, and I think they need to polish a few things. That's my personal opinion, anyway.
Well, Jim, it's interesting because you get to a point that I think all of us that have kind of looked at standards and understand the standard in the certification world understand a little bit, is this idea of being prescriptive in standards and what standards are really intended to do. Risk is an amorphous concept. I mean, we all know that. It's a hard thing to kind of get your arms around, right? So what kind, well, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but really what kind of language would have been more would it push this idea forward better, do you think, than what is in the draft currently?
Well, it's choice of, I wish I could find an actual sentence and read it to you, but some of them as you need to assess. Let me go back to sidestepping your question, perhaps, with attempting to answer it as I sidestep it in a way. There is a sentence and a requirement that you sometimes feel, why did the committee feel the urge to insert the word risk in that particular paragraph? I think the paragraph was initially as good enough. So, and you're absolutely right. Risk. Three of us in this conference can look at the system and the process, and would come back with three different assessments of what the risk is, obviously. And then if you have an auditor, that would be a fourth assessment. All I'm saying is that avoid such, and I'm trying to talk to you and find the appropriate sentence, which I think I'm not doing a good job, but avoid some vague statements. Actually, if I start with the opening statement, determine the risks to conformity of goods and services and customer satisfaction if unintended outputs are delivered. I haven't even finished the sentence. So you say, okay, what does that mean? Why would I be in a business to deliver unintended output anyway? Don't we have already procedures that are 50, 60 years old to make sure that you don't have unintended output? So sometimes I think the committee, in its well-intention, has gone perhaps a little overboard in trying to put appending the word risk in front of a sentence that was already written. And that's what I think they need to rethink the consequences of adding the word risk just about sprinkling it through the standards. Sometimes I think, not only myself, but a lot of people that I talk to, if you corner them and says, okay, what do you think this means? You get a blank look.
So, well, let's talk about that a little bit, Jim. Before we went on, and I want you to cover this a little bit further, is you mentioned you think one of the problems was that rather than try to work the idea of risk throughout the standard, I think you said maybe they should have had just a risk section or a risk paragraph, or handled it a different way other than try to weave it throughout.
Yes, yeah, that was, I think, the opening statement I make in my article. Yes, that was a thought that I'm just putting this thought to everyone to consider. Perhaps instead of trying to customize, since we had used the word customize earlier in your presentation, is trying to customize the word risk to each paragraph, and I think they have tried to include it in 9 separate paragraphs. Perhaps they need to think about collecting all these ideas that I have spread through the 9 paragraphs and collect them into one paragraph and whatever title they want, risk management in your quality system or something like that. And then start with a sentence that, you should do the following in your risk management, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever. And perhaps it would have been better to have everything in one paragraph. That doesn't get you out of the unfortunate possibility of still having a vague verb or a vague word. So, but that's unfortunately, you can't avoid this when you have a committee write. You need to satisfy a lot of people when you write a sentence. So you might start with a clear sentence and then everybody wants to put the 2 cents in, and you end up with a sentence that is not as clear as you intended. But anyway, that was one thought that I suggested. Perhaps put everything into one paragraph instead of spreading it throughout the standard.
Okay. Well, Jim, as usual, the time flies. If people want to read your article, there is a link on it below our player page, so you can link out the article, read the original article from Jim. He has a lot more to say about risk management and ISO 9001 2015. The draft was just released not too long ago. Jim, thanks for joining us on the show this morning.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for the opportunity. Thanks. Bye, guys.
Okay. So long.
Thanks, Jim.